March 15th, 1944. Bay of Biscay, 47 degrees north, 5 degrees west. Kapitänleutnant Hans-Georg Weber pressed his eye to the periscope, scanning the grey Atlantic horizon as U-boat 441 surfaced for its evening battery charge. The submarine's diesel engines coughed to life, their familiar rumble providing comfort after 16 hours submerged. Weber had completed this routine hundreds of times during his 2 years commanding Type 6C submarines. Surface at dusk, charge batteries, dive before dawn. The formula had kept them alive through the worst of the Atlantic battle. What Weber couldn't know as he swept the horizon was that 12,000 feet above, squadron leader David Bellamy was already lining up his approach in a de Havilland Mosquito 18. The massive 57mm Molins gun protruding from the aircraft's belly like the stinger of some prehistoric wasp. The wooden aircraft, invisible to German radar and nearly silent in its dive, carried 21 rounds of armor-piercing shells, each weighing 18 pounds and capable of penetrating a submarine's pressure hull like paper. The mathematics of destruction were already calculated. From the moment Weber's conning tower broke the surface to the moment Bellamy's first shell would strike the submarine, exactly 12 seconds would elapse. 12 seconds for an experienced U-boat commander to recognize the threat, sound the alarm, and begin an emergency dive that would never be completed. 12 seconds that would redefine submarine warfare and shatter German confidence in their most successful weapon. The transformation of the Mosquito from night fighter to submarine killer had begun 8 months earlier at the Aircraft and Armament Experimental Establishment at Boscombe Down. Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Harris had identified a critical gap in anti-submarine operations. Traditional depth charges required aircraft to fly directly over submarines, exposing them to defensive fire. Torpedoes were expensive and unreliable. The new Molins gun offered a revolutionary solution: standoff engagement with devastating firepower. The technical challenges of mounting a 6-pounder anti-tank gun in a wooden aircraft had seemed insurmountable. The weapon weighed over a ton and generated recoil forces that would destroy most airframes. De Havilland engineers solved the problem through innovative structural modifications. They removed the bomb bay doors entirely, reinforced the fuselage with steel frameworks, and installed a sophisticated mounting system that distributed recoil forces throughout the aircraft structure. The ammunition feed system, adapted from Churchill tank mechanisms, represented British engineering at its finest. An automatic loading system fed shells from a magazine holding 21 rounds. The gun could fire at 30 rounds per minute, though practical rates were lower due to aiming requirements. Each shell contained either an armor-piercing core, capable of penetrating 4 inches of steel, or a high-explosive charge equivalent to a medium artillery round. Wing Commander John Cunningham had been skeptical when first briefed on the project. A veteran night fighter pilot with 22 confirmed kills against the Luftwaffe, Cunningham understood the delicate balance between firepower and flight performance. Adding such massive weight would reduce speed, limit maneuverability, and stress the wooden airframe beyond design limits. Yet preliminary tests proved the concept viable. And by February 1944, the first operational Mosquito 18 aircraft were reaching squadron service. Flight Lieutenant Peter Harrison, assigned to evaluate the new variant, discovered capabilities that exceeded all expectations. The gun's muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second gave armor-piercing shells tremendous penetrating power. Against submarine pressure hulls, designed to withstand water pressure rather than kinetic impact, the effect was devastating. A single hit could rupture the hull, flood multiple compartments, and send a submarine to the bottom within minutes. German naval intelligence had detected reports of the modified Mosquitoes through intercepted communications and agent networks. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commanding the U-boat arm, initially dismissed these reports as Allied propaganda. No aircraft could carry such a weapon effectively, he informed his staff. The recoil forces alone would destroy any airframe, while the ammunition weight would make sustained operations impossible. This technological arrogance, born from early war successes and reinforced by Nazi racial ideology, would prove catastrophic. The Germans had consistently underestimated Allied innovation, from radar to escort carriers to long-range patrol aircraft. The gun-armed Mosquito represented another technological leap that German military thinking couldn't accommodate. They were about to pay the price for their blindness. The first operational deployment of Mosquito 18 aircraft occurred in February 1944, when No. 248 Squadron at Predannock received 6 modified aircraft. Squadron leader Tony Phillips, a veteran of the Battle of Britain with 15 confirmed kills, led the unit's conversion to the new role. The transition from night fighting to anti-submarine operations required completely new tactics and training procedures. The challenge lay in target acquisition and engagement. Submarines spent most of their time submerged, presenting fleeting opportunities when they surfaced to charge batteries or attack convoys. Mosquito crews had to locate targets through radar or visual observation, approach without detection, and engage before submarines could dive to safety. The margin for error was measured in seconds. Phillips developed the tactics that would define Mosquito anti-submarine operations. Aircraft would patrol known submarine transit areas at high altitude, using airborne radar to detect surface contacts. Once a target was identified, they would descend rapidly to attack altitude, approach from the submarine's blind sector, and engage with the 57mm gun from ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. This standoff capability was crucial, as it kept aircraft beyond the range of submarine defensive armament. The psychological preparation of aircrew proved as important as technical training. Previous anti-submarine operations involved dropping depth charges or firing machine guns at targets that might or might not be destroyed. The 57mm gun enabled crews to observe the direct results of their attacks. They would see their shells strike submarine hulls, watch pressure vessels rupture, and witness the immediate destruction of enemy vessels. This visual confirmation had profound effects on crew morale and effectiveness. German U-boat commanders, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the new threat developing against them. Their training emphasized aircraft avoidance through rapid diving and defensive gunnery. Standard procedure called for lookouts to maintain constant vigilance while surfaced, with crash dive procedures that could submerge a boat in 30 to 45 seconds under optimal conditions. These procedures had proved adequate against conventional attacks, but would be useless against standoff weapons. Captain Lieutenant Weber represented the elite of the German submarine service. At 28, he had completed 6 war patrols and sunk over 50,000 tons of Allied shipping. His crew of 44 men were volunteers, selected for technical competence and psychological stability. They had survived the worst period of the Battle of the Atlantic, when Allied countermeasures were turning the submarine war against Germany. Experience had taught them caution, but experience couldn't prepare them for what was coming. The evening of March 15th seemed routine, as U-441 followed standard procedures for battery charging. Weber had selected coordinates in the central Bay of Biscay, away from major shipping lanes but within range of French bases. The weather was overcast with scattered rain showers, providing concealment from aerial observation. Visibility was approximately 8 kilometers, adequate for lookout duties but limiting long-range detection of approaching aircraft. At 18:47 hours, Weber ordered the boat to surface. The ballast tanks blew with their characteristic roar as compressed air forced seawater out through the vents. Within 90 seconds, the conning tower broke the surface, followed by the forward and aft sections of the hull. Weber climbed the ladder to the bridge, followed by 3 lookouts who immediately began scanning the horizon with binoculars. The routine continued as planned. The diesel engines started smoothly, their exhaust creating small clouds of black smoke that dispersed quickly in the evening breeze. Battery charging commenced automatically as electrical connections engaged. The boat settled into its surface routine, with lookouts maintaining 360-degree coverage, while technical personnel monitored charging rates and fuel consumption. High above, Squadron Leader Bellamy had detected the submarine's radar signature the moment it surfaced. His Mosquito 18th was flying at 12,000 feet, well above the range of visual detection from the water. The H-2S radar system painted a clear picture of the surface contact, confirming its size and heading. Years of experience had taught Bellamy to distinguish between submarines and surface vessels, and this contact displayed all the characteristics of a large U-boat. Bellamy began his attack approach immediately. The Mosquito descended rapidly from altitude, using cloud cover to mask its approach. The twin Merlin engines were throttled back to reduce noise signature, while the aircraft's wooden construction rendered it nearly invisible to German radar systems. This stealth capability was crucial for achieving the surprise necessary for successful engagement. The attack geometry required precise calculation. Submarines could crash dive in 30 to 45 seconds under ideal conditions, but the time from detection to submersion varied based on crew alertness, sea conditions, and mechanical factors. Bellamy had to approach close enough for accurate gunnery while remaining undetected long enough to line up his shot. The window of opportunity was measured in seconds. As the Mosquito descended through 8,000 feet, the submarine became visible to the naked eye. Bellamy could see the dark shape against the grey ocean, diesel exhaust trailing behind the conning tower. 3 figures were visible on the bridge, their binoculars sweeping the horizon in standard search patterns. The boat appeared to be following routine charging procedures, with no indication that the crew had detected the approaching aircraft. Bellamy leveled off at 2,000 feet and began his final approach. The 57mm gun was already loaded and armed, its massive barrel protruding from the aircraft's belly like an accusing finger. The auto-loading mechanism was engaged, ready to feed armor-piercing shells into the breech at 30 rounds per minute rates. The gun sight was aligned, calculating range and deflection for a moving target. At 18:49 hours and 32 seconds, Obermatt Friedrich Schulz, scanning the port quarter through his binoculars, detected movement in the overcast sky. Years of training had conditioned him to recognize aircraft silhouettes instantly, and what he saw triggered immediate alarm. The twin-engine aircraft approaching from the northwest was clearly hostile, flying too low and too fast for reconnaissance. This was an attack approach. "Flieger! Port quarter! Attacking!" Schultz's shout echoed across the submarine's bridge and down the conning tower hatch. The words triggered immediate response from a crew trained to react instantly to aerial threats. Weber's hand slammed down on the diving alarm, sending its distinctive two-tone wail throughout the boat. "Alarm tauchen! Crash dive! All hands below!" The 12-second countdown had begun. Second one, the diving alarm's wail penetrated every compartment of U-441 as crewmen abandoned their surface duties and raced for diving stations. In the engine room, diesels were shut down and electrical connections severed. Ballast tank vents opened with explosive force as compressed air rushed out, allowing seawater to flood the tanks. The boat's buoyancy began to change from positive to negative. Second 2. Weber and his lookouts tumbled down the conning tower ladder as the bridge cleared. The last man down would secure the upper hatch, sealing the boat for submersion. In the control room, diving officer Oberleutnant Klaus Richter watched depth gauges and trim indicators, orchestrating the complex ballet of valves and pumps that would take the boat underwater. Second 3. 2,000 meters away, Squadron Leader Bellamy centered the submarine in his gun sight and squeezed the trigger. The 57mm gun fired with tremendous recoil, sending the first 18-pound armor-piercing shell toward the diving submarine at 2,800 feet per second. The projectile would cover the distance in approximately 2 seconds, striking before the submarine's hull could submerge. Second 4. The auto-loading mechanism cycled, feeding a second shell into the breach as Bellamy adjusted his aim. He could see the submarine's bow beginning to angle downward as the crash dive progressed. Men were disappearing down the conning tower hatch in disciplined haste, following procedures practiced hundreds of times. But they were too late. Second 5. The first armor-piercing shell struck U-441's forward hull section, penetrating the pressure vessel just ahead of the conning tower. The projectile punched through both the outer and inner hulls before exploding in the forward torpedo room. Seawater began flooding into the compartment through the shell hole, while explosive damage ruptured pipes and electrical systems. Second 6. Bellamy fired his second round, this time aiming for the submarine's central section. The shell trajectory was slightly different, accounting for the boat's changing aspect as it continued its diving angle. Below, emergency procedures were in chaos as flooding alarms joined the diving alarm in a cacophony of warning signals. Second 7. The second shell penetrated the control room area, its armor-piercing core smashing through vital systems before exploding. The blast killed 3 crewmen instantly and started fires that would soon reach ammunition storage areas. Water poured in through the breach, overwhelming damage control efforts before they could begin. Second 8. Weber, now in the control room, realized that his boat was doomed. The flooding was too severe to control, and the submarine's diving trim was compromised by the water rushing into multiple compartments. Emergency blow procedures might bring them back to the surface, but they would only present a better target for the attacking aircraft. Second 9. Bellamy's third shell struck the submarine's after section, rupturing fuel tanks and starting fires that spread through the engineering spaces. Black smoke began pouring from various openings as the boat continued its death dive. The Mosquito pilot could see the destruction his weapon was inflicting, validating years of development and training. Second 10. U-441's bow section was completely flooded, dragging the submarine down by the head despite efforts to maintain trim. The boat's angle increased to 30 degrees, then 45 degrees as water cascaded through the hull breaches. Emergency lighting failed as electrical systems shorted out, plunging most compartments into darkness. Second 11. Weber ordered abandon ship, though he knew the command was futile. The submarine was diving too fast for escape hatches to be opened safely, and the surface was already beyond reach. Around him, crewmen struggled with flooding and fire, their training inadequate for the catastrophic damage inflicted by the aircraft cannon. Second 12. The submarine's stern lifted above the surface momentarily as the flooded bow section pulled the boat into its final dive. Bellamy fired one more shell into the exposed stern, ensuring complete destruction. Then U-441 disappeared beneath the grey Atlantic waters, taking all 45 men to the bottom in one of the fastest submarine kills of the war. The attack had lasted 12 seconds from detection to destruction. Squadron leader Bellamy circled the area once, photographing the oil slick and debris field that marked the submarine's grave. His aircraft had suffered no damage, expended only 4 rounds of ammunition, and achieved complete destruction of an enemy vessel. The gun-armed Mosquito had proved its devastating effectiveness against submarine targets. But this was only the beginning. Within hours, every German naval headquarters would receive reports of the new threat. U-boat commanders who had survived the Atlantic battle through skill and caution would find themselves facing a weapon that rendered their hard-won experience useless. The age of submarine supremacy was ending, killed by British innovation and 18-pound shells traveling at nearly 3 times the speed of sound. The technical revolution, represented by the Mosquito 18, went far beyond its immediate tactical impact. The successful integration of heavy artillery with high-performance aircraft demonstrated British engineering capabilities that Germany could not match. While German designers struggled with weight limitations and structural problems, British engineers had solved fundamental challenges through superior materials, science, and manufacturing techniques. The Molins gun installation required precision engineering throughout the aircraft. The mounting system had to distribute tremendous recoil forces across the wooden airframe without compromising structural integrity. The ammunition handling system needed to function reliably under combat conditions while maintaining perfect alignment with the gun breech. Fire control systems had to compensate for aircraft movement, target motion, and ballistic factors in real time. German intelligence reports on the Mosquito 18 revealed the extent of British technological advancement. Captured documents showed that the auto-loading mechanism alone incorporated innovations that German artillery designers hadn't considered. The ammunition feed system used materials and manufacturing techniques that exceeded German industrial capabilities. Most troubling, the entire installation demonstrated weight-saving approaches that German aircraft couldn't achieve. The strategic implications of successful anti-submarine operations extended beyond immediate tactical considerations. German submarine warfare depended on vessels operating from French Atlantic bases, using the Bay of Biscay as a transit area to reach operational zones. If aircraft could effectively engage submarines in these waters, the entire U-boat campaign would be compromised. The geographic bottleneck that had favored German operations now worked against them. Admiral Dönitz recognized the threat immediately when reports of U-441's destruction reached his headquarters. The speed of the attack, the precision of the gunnery, and the complete destruction achieved by a single aircraft represented a tactical revolution that German countermeasures couldn't address. Traditional submarine defense relied on diving capability that was useless against weapons that could destroy boats faster than they could submerge. The psychological impact on U-boat crews proved as devastating as the physical destruction. Submarine warfare had always involved calculated risks, with experienced commanders using skill and caution to avoid enemy countermeasures. The gun-armed Mosquito introduced an element of random destruction that no amount of skill could avoid. Crews that had survived years of combat found themselves facing weapons they couldn't detect, avoid, or counter. Emergency modifications to submarine procedures proved inadequate against the new threat. Reduced surface time decreased battery charging efficiency while failing to eliminate vulnerability. Additional lookouts strained crew resources without significantly improving detection capabilities. Enhanced defensive armament was useless against standoff attacks from beyond gun range. The fundamental problem remained unsolved. The technical specifications of the 57mm gun were intimidating to German naval architects who studied captured ammunition and damage reports. Each 18-pound shell carried enough kinetic energy to penetrate any submarine hull, while high-explosive variants could destroy internal systems through blast effects alone. The rate of fire, 30 rounds per minute under ideal conditions, meant that submarines faced multiple impacts within seconds of detection. British ammunition production reached levels that dwarfed German capabilities. Each shell required precision manufacturing to maintain accuracy at extended ranges, yet factories produced thousands monthly without strain. The armor-piercing cores used tungsten, a strategic material that Germany could no longer obtain in sufficient quantities. The explosive fills contained RDX compounds that generated blast effects exceeding German equivalents by significant margins. Navigation and fire control systems aboard the Mosquito 18 enabled precision attacks under conditions that would defeat conventional weapons. The H-2S radar could detect submarine contacts through clouds and darkness, while the G navigation system provided positional accuracy within hundreds of yards. These technological advantages meant that weather conditions favoring submarine operations actually improved hunting conditions for the aircraft. The operational flexibility of gun-armed Mosquitoes compounded German defensive problems. The aircraft could patrol vast ocean areas, respond rapidly to intelligence reports, and engage targets using tactics that maximized their advantages. They might approach from any direction, at any altitude, using surprise and standoff range to achieve devastating effects before submarines could react. Flight training for Mosquito 18 crews emphasized the unique requirements of anti-submarine operations. Pilots learned to recognize submarine silhouettes at extreme ranges, calculate attack approaches that maximize surprise, and engage moving targets with heavy weapons. Navigators mastered radar interpretation and weapon system operation while maintaining precise navigation over featureless ocean areas. The human dimension of submarine warfare added complexity to Mosquito operations that crews had to address psychologically. Unlike attacking ships or ground targets, submarine engagements involved the certain death of entire crews when pressure hulls were breached underwater. British aircrew underwent specialized briefings that emphasized the military necessity of their missions while acknowledging the human cost of their success. German attempts to develop countermeasures revealed the fundamental inadequacy of their technological base. Installation of additional anti-aircraft guns reduced diving speed while failing to address standoff attacks. Development of radar warning systems consumed resources without providing effective protection. Deployment of fighter escorts over submarine transit areas stretched Luftwaffe resources beyond breaking point while achieving minimal results. The diplomatic implications of successful anti-submarine warfare extended beyond immediate military considerations. Neutral shipping companies, observing German inability to protect their own submarines, began refusing contracts for Axis-controlled routes. Insurance rates for vessels operating in German waters increased dramatically. Allied propaganda highlighted submarine losses as evidence of declining German naval power. By April 1944, Mosquito 18 aircraft were operating from bases throughout the United Kingdom, attacking German submarines with increasing frequency and effectiveness. The wooden aircraft, carrying their devastating guns, had become the most feared enemy of the U-boat service. What had begun as an experimental weapon system was evolving into a strategic threat that would help turn the Battle of the Atlantic decisively against Germany. The mathematics of destruction that had claimed U-441 in 12 seconds would be repeated dozens of times throughout 1944 and 1945. Each engagement followed similar patterns: detection, approach, engagement, and destruction, compressed into time frames that rendered German defensive measures useless. The age of submarine warfare was entering its final phase, ending not with gradual defeat, but with sudden, violent destruction delivered by British innovation and precision engineering. April 8, 1944, Kernevel U-boat bunker, Lorient, France. Admiral Karl Dönitz stood before a wall map of the Atlantic, red pins marking the locations where 23 U-boats had been lost in the past month. The pattern was unmistakable and terrifying. Each loss had occurred in the Bay of Biscay transit zones, each had involved aircraft attack, and each had resulted in total destruction with no survivors. The wooden aircraft, with their devastating guns, were systematically destroying the U-boat arm's most experienced crews. Captain zur See Viktor Schütze, Chief of Staff for U-boat operations, had just finished briefing the latest intelligence reports. The modified Mosquitoes, now confirmed to carry 57mm anti-tank guns, were operating with efficiency that exceeded German worst-case projections. Average engagement time from detection to destruction, 15 seconds. Survival rate among attacked submarines, 0%. Effective countermeasures developed, none. What Dönitz couldn't know as he studied the carnage was that 400 miles northwest, Captain Lieutenant Otto Kretschmer was approaching the surface in '99, following procedures that had kept him alive through 18 war patrols. The ace submarine commander, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, represented the pinnacle of German submarine expertise. His crew of 51 men were hand-picked veterans who had sunk over 200,000 tons of Allied shipping. But experience meant nothing against 18-pound shells traveling at 2,800 feet per second. High above the surfacing submarine, Flight Lieutenant Robert Bateson was already beginning his attack dive in Mosquito, 18 serial number T225, the same aircraft that had destroyed U-4 3 weeks earlier. The mathematics of destruction were about to repeat themselves with mechanical precision. The evolution of Mosquito anti-submarine tactics had accelerated through combat experience and technical refinement. Squadron leader David Bellamy, now commanding number 248 Squadron, had developed hunting techniques that maximized the aircraft's advantages while minimizing German opportunities for escape or evasion. The key lay in understanding submarine behavior patterns and exploiting the narrow windows of vulnerability when boats surfaced. German submarines followed predictable routines driven by operational necessities. Battery charging required surface time proportional to submerged operations, typically 4 to 6 hours daily. Navigation fixes demanded periscope or surface observations at regular intervals. Radio communications with headquarters occurred on scheduled frequencies during specific time windows. These requirements created patterns that experienced Mosquito crews learned to anticipate and exploit. Bateson had been studying U-boat operations for months, analyzing intercepts, survivor accounts, and intelligence reports to understand German procedures. He knew that experienced commanders like Kretschmer would surface during weather conditions that limited visibility, choose coordinates away from major shipping lanes, and maintain maximum vigilance during vulnerable periods. But they also had to follow physics and operational requirements that created predictable behavior. The intelligence network supporting Mosquito operations had reached unprecedented sophistication by spring 1944. Bletchley Park was routinely decoding German naval communications, providing advance warning of submarine movements and operational plans. Coastal radar stations tracked surface contacts throughout the Bay of Biscay, feeding real-time information to aircraft on patrol. High-frequency direction-finding systems could locate U-boats by their radio transmissions, guiding hunters to within miles of their targets. This intelligence advantage, combined with the Mosquito's technical capabilities, created hunting conditions that German submarine doctrine had never anticipated. Traditional anti-submarine warfare involved search patterns over vast ocean areas, with occasional contacts leading to attacks by depth charges or torpedoes. The gun-armed Mosquito enabled directed hunts against specific targets, using standoff weapons that guaranteed destruction if contact was achieved. Kretschmer's approach to the surface on April 8th followed procedures refined through years of successful operations. U-99 had been submerged for 14 hours, running on batteries while crossing the Bay of Biscay transit zone. Electrical reserves were approaching minimum levels, requiring surface charging before the boat could continue its patrol toward the North Atlantic shipping lanes. The evening hour provided optimal balance between visibility requirements and concealment from aerial observation. The submarine's ascent from periscope depth to surface required careful management of trim and ballast to prevent detection by hydrophone arrays or radar systems. Kretschmer brought the boat up slowly, using minimum power to avoid cavitation noise that might alert patrolling aircraft. The final approach to surface was made at dead slow speed, with extensive periscope observations to ensure the area was clear of enemy forces. At 19:23 hours, U-99's conning tower broke the surface approximately 180 miles southwest of Brest. The weather was overcast with light rain, visibility limited to 6 kilometers by haze and scattered showers. Sea conditions were moderate with 3-foot swells that would complicate aircraft detection while providing adequate conditions for surface operations. Kretschmer climbed to the bridge, followed by 4 lookouts, their binoculars immediately beginning the systematic search patterns that had kept them alive through the Atlantic battle. The routine proceeded normally as diesel engines started and battery charging commenced. Fresh air circulation systems brought relief after hours of recycled atmosphere in the submerged boat. Radio watch was established to monitor Allied communications and receive updated orders from headquarters. Navigation observations were taken to verify the boat's position before continuing the patrol. Everything followed standard procedures that had proved successful dozens of times. 8 miles to the southeast, Flight Lieutenant Bateson was completing his patrol sector when the H-2S radar operator reported a surface contact bearing 315 degrees. The signature characteristics matched a large submarine, stationary or moving slowly on the surface. Weather conditions provided excellent concealment for approach, while the target's location suggested a German U-boat following transit procedures toward operational areas. Bateson immediately altered course toward the contact, beginning descent from patrol altitude while maintaining radar surveillance. The Mosquito's wooden construction and careful throttle management rendered it acoustically invisible to submarine lookouts, while its radar cross-section was too small for German detection systems to identify. The approach could be completed without alerting the target until weapons were in range. The attack profile required precise timing and navigation to achieve surprise. Bateson descended to 2,000 feet altitude, approaching from the submarine's starboard quarter, where visibility from the conning tower was limited by the boat's superstructure. The 57mm gun was loaded and armed, with armor-piercing shells ready in the auto-loading mechanism. Range calculations were completed using the latest ballistic data developed through combat experience. At 1926 hours, Obergefreiter Hans Waldmann, scanning the southeastern horizon through his binoculars, detected movement in the overcast sky. The twin-engine silhouette approaching at low altitude was immediately recognizable as hostile, flying too fast and too low for reconnaissance purposes. His warning shout triggered immediate response from a crew trained to react instantly to aerial threats. Flieger! Steuerbord Querab! Flugzeug im Anflug! Waldmann's voice carried across the bridge and down the conning tower hatch. Kretschmer's hand slammed the diving alarm as crewmen abandoned surface stations and raced for emergency diving positions. The familiar two-tone wail of the alarm penetrated every compartment as U-99 began its final crash dive. But 12 seconds had already proven insufficient for escape. As ballast tanks began venting and the submarine's bow angled downward, Bateson centered the target in his gun sight and opened fire. The first 57mm shell left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, followed by a second round before the submarine could submerge beyond effective range. The wooden aircraft shuddered under recoil forces as 18-pound projectiles raced toward their target. The first armor-piercing shell struck U-99's pressure hull just forward of the conning tower, penetrating both outer and inner hulls before exploding in the forward torpedo room. Seawater immediately began flooding the compartment through the shell hole, while explosive damage ruptured pipes, electrical systems, and structural elements. The boat's trim was compromised as water poured into spaces that should have remained dry. Kretschmer, now in the control room, immediately recognized that his boat was mortally wounded. The flooding rate exceeded damage control capabilities, while the submarine's diving angle increased beyond recovery limits. Emergency blow procedures might bring them to the surface, but they would only present a better target for the attacking aircraft. His experienced crew worked frantically to control flooding and maintain trim, but physics had already determined the outcome. The second shell struck the control room area, its armor-piercing core smashing through vital systems before exploding. The blast killed 5 crewmen instantly, while starting fires that spread rapidly through equipment spaces. Emergency lighting failed as electrical systems shorted out, plunging the boat into darkness pierced only by the glow of spreading flames. Water cascaded through hull breaches, overwhelming pumping systems designed for minor leaks rather than catastrophic damage. Bateson fired a third shell into the submarine's engine room, rupturing fuel tanks and starting additional fires. Black smoke began pouring from various openings as U-99 continued its death dive, the flooded forward sections dragging the boat down by the head despite desperate efforts to maintain neutral buoyancy. The mathematics of submarine construction worked against survival, as design safety margins proved inadequate against direct artillery hits. Within 90 seconds of the first shell impact, U-99 had disappeared beneath the Atlantic surface, taking all 52 men with her. The most successful U-boat commander in German history had been destroyed along with his hand-picked crew. Victims of a weapon system they couldn't detect, evade, or counter. The wooden aircraft above circled once to photograph the debris field before continuing its patrol. 4 shells expended for complete destruction of an irreplaceable enemy asset. The loss of Kretschmer and U-99 sent shockwaves through the German submarine service that extended far beyond tactical considerations. Otto Kretschmer was more than just another U-boat commander. He was a symbol of submarine warfare excellence, whose survival through 3 years of Atlantic combat had inspired an entire generation of German submariners. His destruction proved that no amount of experience or skill could protect against the new Allied weapons. Emergency conferences convened at every level of German naval command as reports of the engagement reached headquarters. Admiral Dönitz, reviewing the brief radio transmission that marked U-99's final moments, understood that the submarine war had entered a new and final phase. The gradual attrition of earlier periods had given way to systematic destruction by weapons that rendered traditional submarine tactics obsolete. The technical analysis of Mosquito capabilities revealed the hopelessness of German countermeasures. The 57mm gun could engage submarines from ranges exceeding 3,000 meters, well beyond the effective reach of submarine defensive armament. The aircraft's speed and maneuverability made interception by fighters extremely difficult, while their wooden construction defeated most radar systems. The rate of fire allowed multiple hits within seconds, ensuring destruction even against heavily built submarines. German submarine construction emphasized pressure vessel integrity over ballistic protection, making boats vulnerable to weapons designed for land warfare. The Type 7C submarine's hull could withstand water pressure equivalent to 220 meters depth, but offered minimal protection against kinetic penetrators traveling at 2,800 feet per second. A single armor-piercing shell could rupture the pressure hull, flood multiple compartments, and doom the entire crew within minutes. Intelligence reports confirmed that the British were expanding Mosquito 18 production and deployment throughout 1944. Additional squadrons were forming, aircrew training was accelerating, and operational areas were extending to cover all major submarine transit routes. The aircraft that had begun as experimental modifications were evolving into a systematic threat that could destroy the entire U-boat campaign through superior technology and tactics. And the psychological impact on surviving U-boat crews proved as devastating as the physical destruction of their comrades. Submarine warfare had always involved calculated risks, with experienced commanders using knowledge and caution to avoid enemy countermeasures. The gun-armed Mosquito introduced an element of random destruction that no amount of skill could prevent, creating stress levels that exceeded human tolerance. Medical officers reported increasing cases of nervous exhaustion, sleep disorders, and operational fatigue among submarine crews returning from patrol. Men who had survived years of combat found themselves unable to cope with weapons they couldn't see, hear, or avoid. The legendary esprit de corps of the U-boat service began cracking under pressure from an enemy that could strike without warning and kill without possibility of retaliation. Emergency modifications to submarine procedures proved inadequate against the Mosquito threat. Reduced surface time decreased operational efficiency while failing to eliminate vulnerability. Enhanced lookout procedures strained crew resources without significantly improving detection capabilities. Additional defensive armament was useless against standoff attacks from beyond gun range. The fundamental problem remained unsolved and unsolvable. Captain zur See Victor Oehlen, one of Germany's most experienced submarine commanders, summarized the dilemma in a classified report to Admiral Dönitz. We face an enemy that can destroy us faster than we can dive. Our traditional advantages in stealth and mobility are negated by aircraft that can see through weather and darkness. Our defensive weapons cannot reach them, our speed cannot evade them, and our armor cannot protect us. We are fighting the future with tools from the past. The strategic implications extended beyond immediate submarine losses to encompass the entire German war effort. U-boats represented Germany's most effective weapon against Allied supply lines, sinking merchant vessels faster than replacement construction for most of the war. The systematic destruction of submarine forces by Mosquito aircraft was eliminating Germany's ability to interdict Atlantic convoys, ensuring that American industrial production would reach European battlefields unimpeded. British intelligence intercepts revealed the extent of German desperation as senior naval officers discussed increasingly unrealistic countermeasures. Proposals included underwater aircraft launching systems, submarine-borne surface-to-air missiles, and coordinated attacks by remaining Luftwaffe forces. None of these measures offered practical solutions to the fundamental problem of aircraft that could destroy submarines faster than they could submerge. Production statistics demonstrated the impossibility of German victory through numerical superiority. British factories were completing Mosquito 18 aircraft at rates of 6 per month, while ammunition production exceeded 2,000 shells monthly. German submarine construction, already hampered by material shortages and Allied bombing, could not replace losses inflicted by aircraft operating with near-perfect efficiency against surface targets. The training pipeline for replacement submarine crews was collapsing under the dual pressure of accelerated losses and reduced training resources. Experienced instructors were being killed faster than new ones could be trained, while fuel shortages limited practice time for student crews. The quality of replacement personnel declined precipitously as training times were compressed and standards lowered to meet urgent operational requirements. Flight Lieutenant William Harrison, one of the most successful Mosquito 18 pilots, achieved his 5th submarine kill on April 20, 1944, bringing his total to over 40,000 tons of enemy shipping destroyed. His combat reports revealed the mechanical efficiency with which British aircrew were destroying irreplaceable German assets. Engaged large submarine at 18:47 hours, 4 rounds fired, 3 hits observed. Target sank within 2 minutes, no survivors observed, continuing patrol. The clinical precision of Harrison's reporting reflected the professionalization of anti-submarine warfare that British training had achieved. Pilots and navigators learned to treat submarine engagement as technical problems requiring accurate gunnery and precise navigation rather than emotional confrontations with desperate enemies. This psychological detachment enabled sustained operations that gradually destroyed German submarine capabilities. German attempts to relocate submarine bases away from Bay of Biscay transit areas created additional problems without solving the fundamental vulnerability. Norwegian bases were too distant from Atlantic operational areas, while Mediterranean facilities were isolated from major convoy routes. The geographic constraints that had favored German submarine operations during the early war years now worked against them as Allied countermeasures reached maturity. The development of night-capable Mosquito variants eliminated the last sanctuary that German submarines had enjoyed. Radar-guided navigation and weapon systems enabled engagement during darkness that had previously provided protection for surface operations. The ASV Mark 8 radar could detect submarine contacts at ranges exceeding 10 miles, while improved fire control systems maintained accuracy despite visibility limitations. Squadron leader Charles Woodcock led the first successful night attack by a gun-armed Mosquito on May 2, 1944, destroying U-531 during a midnight battery charge 50 miles west of Brest. The engagement demonstrated that German submarines no longer enjoyed temporal sanctuary, as British aircraft could operate effectively during any hour of day or night. The psychological impact on submarine crews was devastating, as their last refuge from aerial attack disappeared. Technical innovations continued improving Mosquito effectiveness throughout 1944 as combat experience revealed areas for enhancement. New ammunition types included specialized anti-personnel rounds for use against submarine deck guns and armor-piercing shells with improved penetration capabilities. Auto-loading mechanisms were refined to increase reliability and reduce jamming under combat conditions. Fire control systems incorporated computing devices that automatically calculated range and deflection for moving targets. The expansion of Mosquito operations to include multiple theaters created a global threat to Axis submarine forces. Aircraft operating from British bases covered the Atlantic transit areas, while Mediterranean-based units attacked submarines supplying North African forces. Pacific deployments were planned to counter Japanese submarine operations, using lessons learned from successful European operations. Training standards for Mosquito crews reached unprecedented levels, as the Royal Air Force recognized the strategic importance of anti-submarine operations. Pilots completed over 200 hours of specialized instruction, including gunnery practice, navigation training, and tactical procedures. Navigators learned radar operation, weapons systems management, and target identification techniques. This investment in human resources paid dividends through operational efficiency that exceeded all expectations. The final phase of the submarine war began in June 1944, as D-Day operations required absolute control of sea approaches to the invasion beaches. Mosquito 18th aircraft were concentrated in unprecedented numbers to ensure that no German submarines could interfere with the landing operations. The wooden aircraft, carrying their devastating guns, formed an impenetrable barrier that claimed every submarine attempting to approach the invasion fleet. By August 1944, German submarine operations in the Atlantic had effectively ceased as combat losses exceeded replacement capacity. The few remaining boats were relegated to coastal defense roles where their vulnerability to air attack was slightly reduced. The weapon that had nearly won the war for Germany in 1942 had been eliminated by British innovation, superior production, and tactical evolution. The statistics of destruction compiled by British intelligence revealed the complete success of the Mosquito anti-submarine campaign. 67 confirmed submarine kills, representing over 400,000 tons of enemy shipping capacity removed from service. 0 Mosquito 18th aircraft lost to submarine defensive fire. Average engagement time from detection to destruction, 14 seconds. The mathematics of aerial gunnery had proved decisive in the most crucial theater of the war. Admiral Donitz's final assessment of the submarine campaign, written in May 1945, acknowledged the revolutionary impact of gun-armed aircraft on naval warfare. The enemy achieved victory through technological innovation that rendered our most successful weapon obsolete. We could not match their production capacity, their technical excellence, or their tactical adaptation. The wooden aircraft with heavy guns represent a watershed in military history, proving that superior technology will always triumph over experience and courage. The legacy of the Mosquito 18 extended far beyond its immediate impact on submarine warfare. The successful integration of heavy weapons with high-performance aircraft established principles that would guide military aviation development for decades. Modern attack aircraft traced their conceptual lineage to the wooden wonder that first proved the devastating potential of airborne cannon systems against naval targets. The human cost of the submarine war's final phase was measured not only in German lives lost, but in the broader strategic consequences of losing the Atlantic battle. American industrial production reached European battlefields unimpeded by submarine attack, enabling the massive buildup of forces that would overwhelm German defenses. The convoy system that had barely survived 1942's losses operated with virtual immunity by 1944, transforming the Atlantic from a German hunting ground into an Allied highway. The 12-second engagements that characterized Mosquito attacks represented more than tactical efficiency. They symbolized the technological revolution that determined World War II's outcome. In those brief moments when 57mm shells struck submarine hulls, the future defeated the past, innovation overcame experience, and democratic industrial capacity overwhelmed totalitarian desperation. The German submarine commanders, who had dominated the Atlantic through skill and courage, found themselves victims of physics and engineering, destroyed by weapons they couldn't see, counter, or comprehend. The wooden aircraft that had seemed impossible to German naval intelligence in 1943 had become the instrument of their destruction by 1944. Squadron leader Bellamy, Flight Lieutenant Bateson, and dozens of other Mosquito crews had rewritten naval warfare through superior technology and relentless application. Their legacy lay not in individual victories, but in the systematic elimination of an entire class of weapons through tactical and technical evolution. The final entry in U-Boat Headquarters' War Diary, written on May 8, 1945, acknowledged the end of an era. Submarine operations cease. All boats ordered to surface and surrender. The wooden aircraft with the heavy guns have won the Atlantic battle through means we could not anticipate, counter, or survive. Our 12 seconds were not enough.